What's up, movie lovers? Thanks for clicking on my channel. Titanic is a 1997 epic romantic drama film directed by James Cameron, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. You probably already knew that. It's still one of the highest grossing films of all time, and its shadow looms large in the popular consciousness. But with this review, I just want to see if I could go back, re-examine it, see if it still holds up, and also try to maybe come at it from an angle that not a lot of people talk about why I think it resonated so much with so many people. But before we get into it, if you like movies and music, any of these bands, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I do movie reviews and talk about music here. That's pretty much it. Shameless plug out of the way, let's get back into it. So I think that one of the things that makes Titanic stand out so much is just how unbelievably immersive the set design and the sense of scale and the production is. There are very few movies in the history of filmmaking that have captured this sense of awe and epicness. I mean, you really have to go to films like Ben-Hur or The Lord of the Rings to even just compare like how much you feel as though you really are on this ship. Another aspect of this film's immersion that I would just be kicking myself if I didn't mention is the score composed by James Horner. James Horner is without a doubt one of my all-time favorite film composers, and he was very eclectic. He could do a lot of different styles, but with Titanic, as with Braveheart, he really is in his comfort zone of writing music that is very Celtic inspired. And that sense of immersion and scale is something that really helps to kind of flatten out some of the flaws in the first half of this movie, and also just make the second half of this movie so emotionally impactful and just absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, one of the common criticisms of Titanic is how cheesy and cliche the first half is. A lot of people will say it's the typical romance between the woman who feels trapped, her rich but douchey fiance, and then this young looking boy toy who's gonna come and like sweep her off her feet. And that is all fair and that is true, but I feel like this movie earns its runtime and it earns that first half because it's building up to the second half, and without that first hour and a half of getting to know these people, feeling so lighthearted, feeling so kind of like just carefree, that second half would not be anywhere nearly as devastating. You have Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, who are of course amazing, but the ensemble cast is also absolutely amazing. One of my personal favorites is Bernard Hill as the captain. Rest in peace, Theoden King. Billy Zane is also cartoonishly over the top as the villain, but he still makes it work because he just has such charisma. You spend the first half of this movie feeling such a sense of wonder and excitement that the people who were on the Titanic would have been feeling, that you can almost trick your mind into thinking everything's gonna be okay, but I mean, spoilers. And the second half of this movie is just an absolute horror show, and it's so sad as hell. Because this is the only movie that I can think of off the top of my head where when there's all this carnage and death going on, you're not just seeing random extras, you're actually seeing people who you knew. You spent time with these side characters and hearing about their stories and their hopes and their dreams, and then you just see them die in a really unceremonious way. Like, imagine if in the first scene of Saving Private Ryan, it wasn't the first scene, it was actually the last scene, and every single person you saw getting blown to pieces, you knew that they had a family, and that they had a fiance, and that they had hopes and dreams that they are never going to get to fulfill now. Yeah. Pretty depressing, isn't it? And that is definitely one of the strongest elements of this movie, just how much grief and sadness you feel when the ship is sinking, watching all these people have to come to terms with their own mortality. But that is also, I think, one of its greatest strengths, but also one of its greatest weaknesses, because as much as I think that Titanic is like an A-tier film, it's not quite up in S-tier for me, just because there is such a drastic contrast between the first half of the movie and the second half. The first half is like The Princess Bride or Sleepless in Seattle, and the second half is like Come and See. How many times are you going to be wanting to have a movie night and you're like, oh yeah, you know, let's have a movie where the first half is just unbelievably cheesy and the second half makes me just feel absolute despair. That's exactly what James Cameron was going for, and he does it incredibly well, but that is also something that Titanic is the type of movie you have to be in a very specific mood to want to watch. I think that that massive contrast in tone is why this movie resonated with so many people for such a long time though. And I think like any great piece of art, this movie really does drive home the importance and the value that can be placed in one human life. Just like with the main character Rose, where she survives and all these other good people die, you as the audience is left wondering, why have I been given this life where so many people who came before me, who were good and had just as many hopes and dreams as I do, why do I have this when they got that? But I think that after almost 30 years, that's why this movie still holds up really well. I actually think of a quote that J.R. Tolkien said when he was talking about Lord of the Rings, and he said that any story is really just about the inevitability of death and how humans react to it. I don't know if I would go that far as to say that every single story that resonates with people is just dealing with that, but I feel that's what Titanic is also getting at, that it's just how we deal with our own mortality and how that makes our life way more valuable. Really driving home that point of just how much you can do in one life, how much one human's time on this earth can mean to so many people, and also a sense of sadness and loss for the people who had their lives cut short. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Titanic. Did I add anything new to the discussion? But let me know what you think about Titanic below, and what are some of your favorite movies. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you at the next video.